Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of our podcast series. Today, I am thrilled to death to be talking to Beth Snyder, a good friend of mine, who's been in the industry for a while. So, Beth, tell us about what you're doing now, kind of how you got into this industry, and let everybody know a little bit about yourself.
Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for thinking of me to be on your podcast. I love you. I love the people in our industry. So the fact that I was able to get in early with fiber in the ground as compared to the Bell copper was exciting. I took a little bit of time off to be at home with our 3 kids. And then almost 4 years ago, I was able to return to, what was called remote peering, still fiber, but we're remote peering it into various POPs, into various data centers around the world. From there, I was able to go back to fiber and a little bit of data center at Zayo. From there, now I'm in layer 3. So as we know with the OSI model, there's 1, 2, and now I'm in 3 software, which is pretty exciting. And we're trying to make those fiber connections automated, virtualized, point click easy. So I feel lucky to be here, and I love the people in our community, and I like the work. So it's pretty exciting for me.
So tell us a little bit about how you fell into this industry. So talk about your education, which is not in this industry.
Nope.
And then tell everybody kind of how you fell in, because, one of the things we talk about on this podcast, is that there's a million ways to get into this industry, right? There's 100 paths to Kevin Bacon, as they say.
Right.
But also, you don't have to write code to be in this industry, which is kind of the focus here, that there's, talking about all the different jobs. So back up a little bit and tell us some more.
Well, and I'm not going to tell you something you don't already know or advocate, and something I already don't know and advocate, and that is you don't even have to have a college degree. How did I really get into this industry? So my dad, who refused at the request of his father to go to Cal Berkeley and went to a Foothill Community College instead, working 2 or 3 jobs. At the time, I think it was Pizza Hut, and he got started at Pacific Bell out here in California. He's a hard worker, and he saw a path within Pacific Bell and was able to work hard and learn from his peers and get promoted. I watched my dad work at Pac Bell and then at like a computer alternative to IBM called Omdal. Then I watched him go to US West in Minnesota. I watched him come back and go to another computer company. I watched him get started at Brooks Fiber. I was just getting out of college where I'd completed a bio degree. I thought I was going to be a doctor. And he said, given that you love people, you should think about sales. There's a satellite office here in this company called Brooks Fiber Communication. Why don't you interview? And I enjoyed it. For the first couple months, I enjoyed being in business, but it wasn't until OSP, or outside plant, the folks who really put the fiber in the ground. So Brooks Fiber was the first in Santa Clara County, South Bay. So you've got San Francisco, and then you've got South Bay, which is really San Jose, Santa Clara, putting fiber in these tier 2 markets, not San Francisco, but rather the San Jose area. And Brooks Fiber was doing this all over the nation. So when the outside plant folks came in and said, hey, how's sales? How's the business side of it? And they took me out to show me the directional board, to show me the spools of fiber. It really became real to me what we were doing. Part construction company, part absolutely new tech, lighting these sonic rings and connecting office buildings and large name companies to this ring. And I think I was hooked. Part of it, and this is sort of the craziness of me, maybe it's true, maybe it's not. On a personal level, it's connecting. And in sales and in this business, you're literally connecting with, for example, you and I are connecting. I'm connecting with my customers, but we're literally connecting networks. And at the time, 97, 98, 99, I didn't truly understand connecting networks. It would be as the internet started to manifest, as we started to make the internet, that I would see how we were literally physically interconnecting networks. PAX with Jay Adelson, Exodus, AboveNet. These are my first views into what would become the internet. So weird, a little strange background, but bio has neuro. You connect all your neurons and make new pathways. In the internet, we connect all our networks and make new pathways.
Wow, what a great analogy. Yeah, I think for people not in the industry, fiber is absolutely sort of the backbone of everything. People sort of think of things just kind of connecting on a phone because there's no wire, but whatever that talks to is connected by fiber. There's a massive amount of subsea cables that connect all the countries together to make that work. It's not always extraterrestrial. most of it actually is through the fiber.
Absolutely. And as I grab my phone, if I'm on T-Mobile, which I am, and I call you, let's say you're on AT&T, how do they talk? Well, this sends a signal, a wireless signal to, you've all seen them. There's a tower, a cell tower. You've all lost signal, right? We've all lost signal waiting for the, can I get signals? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? And once that cell tower picks up my signal, it can then send the signal over fiber where it meets your AT&T, and then they physically connect over fiber to send you my phone call. And, I like to tell folks who are not in the industry or are in different parts of the industry. So if I work at a network, a Zayo, an AT&T, former Pac Bell, Level 3, any of the network companies, it can't be harder. I don't want anybody to tell you networking is hard. It was two cans and a string, not a bird, a toucan, but a can, a data center, or my phone and your phone, or a customer's office back to a data center. It goes over fiber. Sometimes it goes over wireless. Don't let anybody tell you it's more complicated than that. You have to have two devices and something to connect them. And we can layer things on top. That's the OSI model. You can, the two devices and the wire that connects them is layer one. We've got a little bit of switching, kind of tell you where my phone call goes to get to you. And then the layer three, makes it a little pointy clicky easier. So I don't like it when people try to make it harder or think they can't learn it. To me, it should not be hard.
And you bring up a really great point, because there's different levels of things that you do, right? So once the fiber connectivity is there, security is another layer that kind of trips people up and people think it's terrible. But, I sort of equate the whole fiber in the ground and the network connectivity. Of course, I'm older, so I remember the skit with one ringy dingy, two ringy dingy, and the switchboard operator literally picks up the connection and connects it in. And honestly, that's done through software now and backplanes, but it's literally that easy.
Absolutely. Feel free to get water if you need it. I know what it's like.
So tell us a little bit about the software piece of things, because there's companies out there that have made ridiculous amounts of money training people on different switches and technology and all the intricacies. And even I would say from a software perspective, we now have low code, no code software. So you don't have to know all the bits and pieces and bells and whistles. So talk about kind of the evolution for what you guys are doing and how you're using software to your advantage to get rid of some of the A, margin for error, B, complexity, and C, requirements for somebody to be certified for 50 years just to make a communication work.
Sort of an analogy before I get in is before we had easy ways to make a web page, let's say I wanted to make Beth's cupcakes. Before we had the easy plug play templates, if you will, to make a web page, a landing page for Beth's cupcakes, I had to figure out how to code. So software, let's fast forward to now, right? Now I can go do a Google search on how to make a web template, and I can pretty easily type, plug in, et cetera. I don't need to know how to code it, which is fantastic. Now with software in networking, again, two cans and a string, as you mentioned, on that string, you may want it to be secure. You may want some encryption. You may want different things called packet fabric, NAT, various services or functions that you want. When I call you, you want it to be safe, or you want it to filter out something, or you want it to do something when I send this text or a phone call to you. So how do you do that? Typically, or currently, and I heard this from a colleague, Shane, he says, look, your software, easiest way to understand it, picture a data center, cage to cage. We usually have, and this could go throughout a network, between the two cans and a string all over the world, or in a data center cage to cage, you typically have single function hardware. That comes to your point about certifications. Take Cisco. There are several levels of certification to be able to operate a Cisco machine. A Juniper, a Palo Alto, others are often a single function or feature that you would want to add security, packet filtering, et cetera. Typically, you'd have a box for each thing between the two cans and a string. What software is proposing is it's software. It's programmable. It can replace all of those single function boxes that require the operators of those boxes to have all these higher level of certifications. So I love things that are part of my expression, toilet flush simple. I love things that my grandmother could understand. Warren Buffett doesn't invest in a company if he doesn't know what they do, if you can't easily communicate. So when we are putting two cans in a string together, that's called networking. What we do is advanced networking software, which is typically only able to be done by people with a lot of certifications. The idea is my grandmother can do it. The idea is I could do it. The idea is you could do it with a point click, two cans in a string, endpoint, putting the things you want, that's that data, that communication to do with just point click, drag drop. So just like you said, it used to be I would pick up the phone and somebody would be in that central office and say, oh, where do you want to go? Oh, Beth wants to talk to Julie. Okay, got to plug right into Julie. And now we have software to do that, to make these connections across a network or from one device to another. We now have software that can do that. And you don't need all those certifications. So back to, do you have to go to college? You don't. My dad didn't. Can you learn how to use the software to create and maintain secure networks? You can. So that's the promise of what the company I work for, Stateless, is working on now, making networking, putting these two cans in a string together easier.
I think too that especially things like this are a great enabler. So there's a lot of people, especially as edge compute comes out, right? There's going to be all these data center jobs literally existing in every city that we have and a lot of the rural areas, but not everybody's going to have that level of expertise. And so taking that complexity off the table, I think, is so important.
Oh, I mean, I couldn't agree more. How about folks coming back from serving? How about folks like myself coming out of working in the home, being a mom? I feel so grateful that this community of ours welcomed me back in. I think about it all the time with our junior colleges, which I think are the most wonderful thing. You come out of a public school, you go into a public school. There are some schools who are teaching networking. CU in Colorado is not a junior college, but it has a networking program. I believe it was Kentucky I read about, has a full-fledged networking, learn to create networks, which probably means data center, which means fiber. To me, again, because I like the industry so much and because I think it doesn't have to be hard, what a great, we could call it a trade. What a great education and what a great community to join. And if you enjoy putting things together, people and things together, I think it's a great opportunity. I've never been bored. I've never looked outside the industry. I think it's great.
Yeah. And there's so many jobs in tech too. I mean, if you are bored or you're not challenged, you can take a left or take a right. There's certifications to teach you. There's on-the-job training. There's a million ways to get into this industry. And you could get into this industry without massive amounts of student debt, which I think is also, if you're going to go on the engineering side, obviously you need a degree. If you're going to be an architect, you need a degree. There's some of those pieces and parts where those degrees are important. But those are, to be honest, the fewest of the jobs. I think HR requires the degree a lot because for some reason in this country, we've gotten to where we really sort of respect the degree more than the person that holds it. And, somebody that graduates with all D's, in the medical profession is still called a doctor. That doesn't necessarily mean you want to go to him either. But I think that the possibilities out there are endless. And certainly for young kids, because so many of these jobs will help pay for your degree. If you can get that to your junior college or get a footing, get a start, you can even get the skills free online. You can do your own training and kind of thing. I think that's companies like Apple that are 50% of their employees don't have degrees. They figured out that the skills are a lot more important and you can build on it. So, to your example, if you go out there and you watch the fiber go in the ground, that's trades, that's boring, that's people that are running the fiber, terminating the fiber. There's people that sell that service. There's people that sell the service to other businesses. Then there's people that sell networking equipment on top of it. And you just keep building and you have this massive, massive ecosystem of, to your point, people that genuinely care. I mean, this is really a close-knit industry and everybody knows everybody sort of, or at least how to get to somebody pretty quick.
You really bring up a lot as you're talking. And I think I want to start with, I think the thing that really got me when the two folks who led the outside plant came in and took me to their office and then took me on a tour of the city where we were putting the fiber in. I think it was the care. I think they took their job so seriously. And the folks I worked with who had come out of the Bell companies, especially the sales engineers, Beverly Ryan, she took this very seriously. This wasn't a startup, which it was. It wasn't a startup. It wasn't just a sales team to make money and be a salesperson. They understood. It was the first time I really got, we could take people out of business. If you take their phone line down, if you take their fax line down at the time, if they start to be on that fiber backbone, if they are connecting their buildings with fiber, if we cut that fiber or we're transitioning them from copper to fiber, they can't reach the outside world. Now it's the internet. Everything runs over the internet. I was able to see how seriously these folks took what they did, like a doctor takes care of somebody's health. True story, out of college, I am not good at taking tests. So there's a MCAT. So it's a test like an SAT, like a certification, but it's a standardized test you would take to get a high score so that when you would apply to medical school, you would show a high score. I never got a high score. I never got a high score on any standardized tests. I felt very insecure. And to that end, I thought, no one's going to want a doctor who went to the lowest tier school. I'm not going to do that. But I do believe in myself. There's something here. I've got something to offer. I don't exactly know what it was, but in that first job at Brooks Fiber, I realized it was to be a doctor of my customers because I needed to be there for any cutover. Anybody who's been in the industry long enough knows when you are physically taking the copper wires out of your phones and physically putting fiber optics in instead of copper, you're trading copper for fiber to go faster, i.e. the speed of light. Copper would go slower, fiber would go faster. You don't have a phone signal for some amount of time when that cutover is happening.
It's like your cell phone going dead.
It's like your cell phone going dead. And I wanted to be there when your cell phone went dead. I knew what would happen. I knew you were taking a chance on me and my new company called Brooks Fiber Communications when no one would get fired for choosing Pacific Bell. The old adage, nobody got fired for buying IBM. So I knew you needed to be there. And I knew how important having that communication up and running. In that case, in that time it was telephone, and soon it would become internet. And imagine, everybody knows when they hear the AWS West region went down, AWS East region went down, Verizon took AWS, Comcast, Zayo, everybody hears about it when some mistake happens. And so mistakes are going to happen. I don't mean to call people out. Mistakes are going to happen. Companies I've worked for make mistakes. But I just wanted to be there. I took it so seriously, and I learned from people who took their jobs so seriously. And it didn't have a degree or specific extra certificates to feel that way and care that much about the people in our community, about my customers. I just got it from the folks around me. They took this very seriously, and so did I.
Yeah, I think in this industry, you can sort of equate it to electrical linemen, right? They absolutely go out there in the worst of the weather, the best of times, the worst of times, just to make sure that power services work. And it's the same way in this industry with the people that run the backbones and the services and the data centers. Yep. And look what happened with COVID. Look how essential data centers became and all of the information that flowed in and out of those data centers. And look at the disadvantage that some communities had that didn't have the internet services or didn't have access to broadband. So the FCC estimated there's like 82 million people that are below the digital divide. Then Microsoft came in and did a study and said they believe it's probably closer to 163 million that don't have access to critical services because the fiber's not there. The communication isn't there. Or, the cell tower's not there for them to use 5G, which I think is going to help some of these problems. But certainly with COVID, that got worse because look how many people are without a job. And without a job, that means you're not paying for those additional services. And so I think that we're at this place where fiber is going to be so massively important. And even the cable companies that provide internet over their coax cable how much they oversubscribe those lines and the usability compared to what people are actually paying for, I think is going to become another really, really, really big focus. And so people just don't really realize how that one small, simple thing is such an absolute enabler to rural healthcare, learning, internet, over the top streaming services, you name it. It all relies on that fiber.
And to your point, the internet's promise was the democratization of information, that we all, not only do we make the internet, we physically connect networks to make the internet. We physically started to do that with copper and then with fiber. Everybody should have access to information, and not just access to healthcare, right? As words, the device to use it, even if it means you're going to a library, a school, et cetera. In COVID, to your point, you can't go to those places. Not only should everyone, every child who's learning, home learner or distance learner, should absolutely have access to a computer and a way to get information, access to their school's online learning. If only access to YouTube, everyone in my home, my husband learning how to put a pocket door in, my son learning how to change out a bike tire, everyone in my home is, oh, how do I learn that? Hold on, YouTube. And that's the promise of the internet, that the information is available. So I am seeing, I know Google had a huge Google Fiber initiative. I believe the stopping happened at whoever owned the telephone poles. I believe they're, in putting fiber in the ground, in the outside plant world, you have to get permits. So sometimes well-intentioned people, Google Fiber, run into permitting or ownership issues. Who owns that last bit we call the last mile? Who owns that telephone pole or the copper in the ground, or there's not fiber in the ground in the last mile in many rural communities? How do we get that done? And I see folks, Next Level Communications, Daryl Gentry, is working on literally running, whether he's using Crown Cable, he's using Comcast, Crown Cable, he's using known companies as close as he can get to the home. And then he's offering a kit where you roll out your own fiber and you dig your own little trench to your home, or to a you live in a condo or an apartment complex, or you live in a community that has a bunch of people, or you're on a street. What he's doing is he's asking folks on the street, can you all get together and offset the cost of this, rolling your own fiber up the street and into each individual home? He's just one example. There are good people out there trying to get fiber to the rural areas, fiber to people who don't have it. I couldn't agree more. Not only the internet, getting the internet to people so that they can enjoy the democratization of information, everybody can have access to all the information, but also the devices. This isn't cheap. This computer isn't inexpensive. How do we make that like air? Water is not even something I can point to. Not everybody has clean water, and they should. But information and the ability to educate yourself, absolutely.
And there is a big circular economy that's coming up now where companies are donating old laptops and iPads and iPhones. And there's certainly places where you can take those so that they go to those that really need that hand up, not necessarily a handout. They just need access. And
Absolutely.
So newer communities, we're seeing a lot of that, where communities are being pre-wired with fiber, just like they are for power. And from a rural perspective, there's definitely additional options there. There's satellite services. You don't always have to have the fiber. At some point, it'll come into play, right? Even if it's satellite, somewhere, wherever that signal comes back down to earth, is connected via fiber. But I think that certainly if you're looking at jobs in this industry, and if you're good with your hands and you love trades and you love, doing those kind of things, you love being outdoors, you don't want to sit at a desk from 8 to 5. These are really awesome jobs. They pay well, and it's a career.
Absolutely. And you bring up a really good point. If power is there, power got there somehow. Power got to a home in a rural community. Power runs somewhere, whether it's on the power lines above or underground. If you can string a power line, just like a power cord in your house, you can string a cable or a fiber. One of the things that you could think of in this industry is, well, wait, if I'm running, a tube underground that has power in it, Why can't I run within that same tube a fiber line? And these are the types of things, back to sort of biology or medicine, back to neuro, back to our brains. These are the types of things you can think of. Call it problem solving, but that's where you're bringing your own you're bringing your own brain to basically how we are connecting things. We're connecting fiber, but now we're talking about connecting, well, if the electrical lines are running, a fiber line could run. Well, if a cell tower is working for these people or for these carriers, could it work for all these other carriers? And how could it work for a school? There's just, you connect. And I think that's what I love about this industry. I love connecting with you. I love connecting with people. And then you get to connect actual things, cell phone to cell phone tower, fiber to the home, pair electrical with fiber. Wait, how can I make this happen? And there's so many different ways to connect. I think that's what I really love about it. And being able to bring that to this industry, that, call it problem solving, but making those connections is great, especially from somebody who couldn't pass an MCAT to feel good enough to go apply to a medical school. I love bio, right? And so to kind of give up on that, but come into this industry where I love it and wouldn't trade it for the world, and always love to go to our conferences and meet and learn about what people are doing in our industry. I'm thrilled. So I didn't need those degrees to really enjoy my work.
No, but they probably helped you being a mom of 3.
Oh my God.
It at least probably helped you there. But I will say that this industry definitely is big on giving back. It is a very giving industry in trying to solve some of those problems, whether it be through scholarships, certifications, different organizations, reaching out to students and younger people.
Absolutely.
But the problem with this organization, with this whole industry, I think, as far as recognition goes, is that so many people just take it for granted that it's there, right? Yeah. So people pick up a phone, they just assume it's going to work. Nobody really thinks about what happens, who builds those applications, who makes them talk, who stores the data, who does all that. We just know that you can get a funny cartoon or a funny picture on Facebook or Instagram if you're younger, or, whatever your platform of choice is, right. And, figure out ways to make things talk. But it is just such a fascinating industry. It is, to your point, very neuro. It's just like a brain. It's connecting the dots with whatever it is, information. So I think that we have a long way to go. I think we're going to see definitely some new infrastructure projects coming out to cross this digital divide. Nobody was prepared for COVID, and it certainly took a lot of communities by shock, just like a big weather event does. It was the hurricane of 2020. It just lasted most of 2020.
Absolutely. And, back to communities and schools, I know in our area, a lot of communication went out and a lot of effort went out. To be very clear, not everybody has a computer. Not everybody has access to the internet, has an internet connection. We are going to figure out ways, whether we have a classroom with one person in it, whether Chromebooks are distributed and an interconnection is made for those folks. It was constant communication to democratize, to make sure all the children and all the parents knew in this public school district, not everybody has these tools, and we have to make sure that they get the education they need. So a lot of folks came together to make sure, hey, can we get an internet connection at that home, at that person's home? Can we get a Chromebook to them? Can they walk to a safe place where a computer, a safe classroom where a computer is available? Those are the kind of things you got to look out for. It's funny. When I became a mom, I thought, well, this is the greatest thing ever. I would literally take care of anybody else's child. I thought that was the promise of motherhood. I quickly found out that was great, because a lot of people would just take care of their child. And if I'm taking care of mine and that child, well, that's a win-win. But that's what we have to do. And in this community, I've been a recipient of, again, hand up, being brought back into this community. I've had the opportunity to help people find jobs. I was even asked to be a mentor. How honoring. I really feel like I was way more mentored by my mentee than I gave, but I was happy to be asked. And I told him that. I said, you're teaching me as much, if not more, than I am, but that's how I feel. My kids are my teachers as well. We speak probably every quarter. How are you doing? Can I help bring you into this job, or so on? But I mean, that's absolutely how we all are. And I would like to say, I've got a really good friend, and I met him through my husband, Morgan, Dave Crowley. Not only, he'll say all ships rise with the tide. He loves the ocean, loves to fish. He means it. This is somebody who, through his whole career, has hired very new folks, women, all across the board, different types of people. He had the same experience about, and let's just call it out. In what we do, it is considered plumbing. Back to toilet flush simple. The most profitable companies that we can all think of, we have been the absolute plumbing of software. And he knows it. He built huge global networks and knew how to save the company money. How can I, he knew the software runs all over these networks. And did anyone ever really acknowledge, celebrate? And COVID is a disaster and death and awful. And that is what it is. In our industry, we put those pieces together. We put those networks together so that children can learn when they're at home, so that people can work from home. And so in a time of absolute death and devastation, our industry has been able to not only maintain the internet so people can learn, but grow it. We rolled up our sleeves and, okay, what can we do? And that's what we do because we take it so seriously. Because the folks I started in this industry with said, we can't take people out of business. We can't take their ability to make phone calls and now their ability to get on the internet. So it takes the good people, Dave Crowley, and it takes the people, Beverly Ryan, who are willing to say, no, I'm going to stand right by your side until this connection's back up. And Dave, I'm going to stand right by your side until you've got a job. And I'm going to mentor you if I see, hey, do you understand how to behave in this role or how to behave in this company? What do you mean by community? It should mean you're really helping each other out. It might even be better than family. To me, that's what I love about this community, this industry, is we put our money where our mouth is. We give back, we hire, we roll our sleeves up, we stand by our customer and each other when we're down. All right, I'm going to do whatever it takes to get you back up. I say of a coworker of mine, Megan Mathis, I'm good. I'll show up for you. I'll make sure you're back up and running. She would open a vein for you. She would literally open a vein for you if that meant, getting your stuff back up and running. That's what our industry is. And so that's why I talk about the folks coming back from service, military service, the folks coming out of the home like myself. We're so grateful to be back at work. We're so grateful to be mentally stimulated with really good people. This is a wonderful home for people like me, like yourself, like anybody who's worked so hard in your family, who's worked so hard to serve our country, who cares that much. We care that much. This is a great place where people really care. And the skills can be all across the board. You can learn the skills. Whatever skills I have may not be yours, but they're complementary. It's as good of community as I can actually say the word community, and you can't always say that in other areas.
Yeah. And it's a lot like the old on-the-job training, the apprenticeships. There's so many jobs that are just like that, where you learn a skill, you get a job, and you're not saddled with massive amounts of debt. And even to your other point, talking about how terrible COVID was, if it wasn't for tech, we wouldn't have a cure or a vaccine right now, right? So, and we wouldn't understand the cures, and we wouldn't understand the symptoms and the strains. All of that is enabled by tech. So as crazy a time as it is, it's also a very, very exciting time too.
Absolutely. How would we distribute the vaccine? How would we, package it?
You can't do any of it without tech.
Right. Exactly.
Well, we are bumping close to our time, but if you wanted to leave everybody with some parting words, what would you have to say?
Call me anytime.
There you go.
I'm happy to help. We can put my personal email on this podcast. I think there's books, out there that'll, whatever they are, that will try to help a woman in business or help you. It's a person. My dad would say it. I'll probably cry. You can reach out, but you need somebody to reach back. You've got to give people a chance. It does make me cry because I was given so many chances, and people need to have a chance. Everybody deserves more than one chance, right? So let me help.
There you go. Awesome. Well, I will make sure that your contact information is in there.
Please.
And for those of you listening, we will have all of that posted. And of course, I have the same, I would extend the exact same invitation.
And you have.
And I have.
And you have.
So thank you all so much for listening. We look forward to having you on another edition of this podcast series. And please share, pass it around. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.